Hello and welcome to the This is Oro Valley podcast. I am Nick Going, digital content specialist for the town, and today I am joined by Dave Perry. Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Always welcome. And my boss, so I hope I don't mess anything up, Misty Nowak, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. It's an honor to be on your show.
Yes, this was your idea.
Our.
So we brought Dave today onto the show to talk about our 50th anniversary endeavors, which are many. We will talk about all of them, but just to kind of briefly touch on them, we've got our digital timeline, our physical timeline, our podcasts, our videos, and our articles. Dave, you've played a role in all of those, obviously. So have you, Misty. Misty, do you want to talk about the onset of these projects?
Sure.
And why we brought Dave in?
Absolutely. A little bit of context on the 50th. Most folks will be familiar with the fact that we had a fantastic special event in April and a parade. So those public gatherings were really important. But when our team sat down and talked about what do we envision for the year, we wanted to create something that we could leave behind for future Oro Valley residents. And so what came out of that was this idea to do a series of articles where we're collecting stories from the community, as well as podcasts and things like that. And the first person that came to mind who could help us make that vision come to fruition was Dave. Dave is a well-known and respected member of this community, trusted by those who know him. So when he reaches out and asks for an interview, it's very different than some stranger from the town manager's office.
I have a lot of clout in this community.
Well, because you've been hanging with Dave for the past year.
Yeah, Dave has something to do with that.
Yeah, and so it was just the natural fit, especially his background. Dave's been reporting on the town. He was it managing editor, Dave?
I was the publisher and editor of The Explorer for 3 years, 2007 to 2010. And I ran the Oro Valley Chamber for 11 and a half years, retiring in November of 2022.
Everything we needed for this project, we found in one person. And our team didn't have the bandwidth to tackle this project. And so we were so fortunate that Dave agreed to partner with the communications team. And it's been a fun year.
It's been really fun. And Nick, you and I have had the opportunity to speak with and interview some remarkable people. And we've had some experiences and learned and seen some things. And I've learned so much about Oro Valley in this project. And it's been wonderful, really an affirmation, honestly, of what a great place this is.
Well, for those people who are following or who follow the podcast but may not be aware of the stories we've done so far, Dave, do you want to talk about some of the stories, articles, the content that you remember have enjoyed being part of?
Sure, and you know, when Missy and I talked about a framework, we wanted to introduce how did Oro Valley come to be, and we did historical research. We did a lot with the Oro Valley Historical Society, which had an archive of information. We interviewed Twink Monrad, who was a friend of Jim Cree, right down the street, and Jim Cree, the acknowledged co-founder, if you will, with Steve Engel of Oro Valley. And Twink told us some wonderful stories about Jim and what motivated him and what an interesting character Jim Cree was, to include the fact that he discovered and mapped a meteorite field in northwest Arizona near Kingman. And he was, I think, illustrative of, if you will, of the kind of people who live here. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. We had the chance to interview Lauren Rood and his wife, Lila. Before Lauren passed away, Lauren was on the first town council, and he twice cast tie-breaking votes to keep Oro Valley incorporated. And people here don't understand that this almost wasn't a town. This almost fell apart, and one vote made the difference. And you know, as we talk about the project, we have a chance to reach back not very far, 50 years, to say this is how this place came to be. And if you think about older communities, those roots, those events, those players, they're not around. So we had the chance to reach back and talk to some of the people who were there. Not enough of them, honestly, but it's a heck of a story. It's really, and I like to tell a story, and that's a great story.
I think about, as someone who grew up in Oro Valley, have only ever seen kind of this existing community, and to go back in time to hear details like Lauren Rude talked about the original council room having cinder blocks and a piece of, 2x4s
That's right.
to create seating room for people because there just wasn't space to meet.
Sure.
And that's not the Oro Valley that I know, right?
Sure.
But it's cool to see like how far it has come to have that perspective.
And the stories, I mean, the thing I love about it is Oro Valley didn't just happen. There are a sequence of events that lead to a quality or a characteristic. You think about Naranja Park. And we had the interview with Paul Loomis, mayor of Oro Valley, who stood on the courthouse steps to buy the old gravel pit that was a state land parcel, more than 20 years ago. So then you have a series of developments and investments by government that leads to modern day Naranja Park, which is a fantastic facility. But it didn't just happen. There were things that happened along the way. Same with water. We talk about the water utility. That's a story I'm working on now. And our water portfolio is the envy of any community in southern Arizona. But it didn't just happen. People that came before us made decisions about acquiring Central Arizona Project water rights, buying water companies, a huge controversy 25 plus years ago. And it led us to this place where we're in a great position. And there are a whole series of outcomes that have resulted from decisions made years and years ago. And I think you got to know that stuff. That we are better off as residents and as a community if we know where we came from.
And the fact that so many of us don't know those things right now, just our past 50 years, as we move forward as a community, that's going to become less and less known unless we capture that and tell those stories and make them available.
Totally agree with that, Misty. And, I recognize, Nick, that we're not going to get to all the stories that we've talked about.
Sure.
But I do some freelance writing, and I'm going to continue to try to tell some of those stories of people and organizations and events that have led Oro Valley to be what it is.
Let's talk about the onset of the 50th anniversary. One of the first things that you and I worked on was sort of it was a timeline. And we knew there was going to be a physical one that people could look at the 50th anniversary events, but also a digital one that gave us the opportunity to go a little, just to expand on those things. If you haven't seen it, you can see it on the website. You just search for the 50th anniversary and the digital timeline will come up. When my experience, Dave, when starting this was we had some historical archive stuff in the town. We were working with old documents. Do you want to talk about what the process was like building an accurate timeline?
It's a fascinating part of the project. And I give credit to Misty because Misty went to town departments and said, tell us your story, tell us your history. And we received a lot of information that was timeline related from the various water utilities, engineering, the courts, everybody that said, here's how we came to be. And then we had some archival information. The Historical Society had resources. We used the census information to sort of track every 10 years where was Oro Valley in terms of its growth, its demography. And I give a lot of credit, frankly, to Jim Williams.
Yeah.
Jim Williams wrote the book, Oro Valley, the First 50 Years, and I read that book and I highly recommend it. And Jim is a meticulous researcher and historian. Then when I read the book, I said, holy cow, I didn't know that. And that fed into the timeline as well as some of the narrative that went around our history. So multiple sources coming together, and my task was to try to gather it all up and categorize it by decade. And then we had to cut things out. Of course, you can't put everything in there, but I think it became a pretty good sort of history of here's where we were and here's the steps along the way to where we are.
Yeah.
And on the topic of Jim Williams, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the Oro Valley Historical Society because the work that they had done, because they've done such an incredible job capturing our history pre-town incorporation, we got to say, okay, we're going to start with 1974 and move forward because the Historical Society has already covered all of this, and we can point people to those resources, and those resources were valuable to us, and Jim Williams's work was valuable to us. So yeah, kudos to the Historical Society for the work they do and for the foundation they kind of created so that we were able to do this project.
It's easy to wax poetic when it comes to, the history. For me, the theme of this project has been sort of how far we've come. Mm-hmm. For you, what would you say? Why is this project important?
Well, and as we talked about, I do think that if you have the chance to capture the people and the history that have led you to a place, it gives you a better understanding of what's going on around you. How did that come to be? I think let's talk about Steam Pump Ranch, for example. The original European settlers were there. George Push, Mr. Zellweger was there. And today, it's still a heart of the community, but now it's being preserved. And how did we get there? When I first moved to Oro Valley in 2007, Steam Pump was still a working ranch. Carlos was the caretaker and he had horses on the property, and that wasn't very long ago. But people may not know that stuff. And I just think it's fascinating to see the evolution.
So one of the stories that I thought was surprising was that the Aquatic Center was host to Lacey Niemeyer, who competed at the Olympics, which I had no clue about at all. It was very interesting to learn that. And then to further learn about how the Aquatic Center came to be, how it was improved, how it's still being used for various types of communities now. That was another really exciting story for me. And then to know that we had pictures, which Misty took actually, some of them, to use and show other people.
But that was a fun story. I remember, we always have a ribbon cutting or groundbreaking for things. But Lacey actually came back to Oro Valley when we did a grand reopening, because it used to just be a community pool. And then when they added the Olympic pool and the diving boards and the splash pad, and all of a sudden we had this aquatic center, Lacey came back to help us reopen this facility. She let me photograph her swimming and gave us permission to kind of use her name and likeness to promote this facility. And then the mayor and council at the time, they did a synchronized cannonball into the pool, little photography session there. We've had some fun times, photos and stories along the way.
What's interesting, and you mentioned Lacey, is this community is full of highly achieved and highly achieving people. And I wrote the obituary story about General John Wickham, who lived in Oro Valley for many years, and he was the U.S. military chief of staff. He was a national hero in South Korea because when he was stationed there, the United States military helped fend off an attempted coup, a threat to a democracy. His obituary ran on page 1 in Seoul, South Korea newspapers, and he lived at Splendido. And before that, he lived in Sun City. And, there are so many. Lou Waters, the founding anchor of CNN, lives in Oro Valley. And those people live here. They're our neighbors. And I'm always amazed at, who's the next Lacey Niemeyer? Who's going to come out of that pump track up there at Naranja and compete nationally? It's going to happen. And it's so cool.
Speaking of Naranja, it's amazing that in our 50th year, we have some major celebrations going on. The timing just worked out nicely, and the grand reopening of Naranja Park to happen in our 50th year, as well as at the Naranja Park property, the Southern Arizona Heroes Memorial, which will have their ribbon cutting,
also,
I believe.
Ties to Dick Eggerding there.
Yeah,
sure.
And that'll be this November. Mm-hmm. So to have these two major things happen in our 50th year, to really kick us off into our next 50th is great. It's exciting.
It truly is. And, the next 50 years for Oro Valley are going to be even better than the ones that we've had,
Absolutely.
I think. And, I say a lot that, our problems are kind of small, honestly. We have a well-funded government. We have terrific infrastructure. We're safe. We're clean. We've got great water supply. So we got to take those assets and say, how do we expand them further? And, I've said to members of the town planning staff, we could be the model community in the American Southwest for how to live in a hotter climate, how to manage growth, how to reduce the things that we consume. We're there. We could do it if we have the will to do it. And frankly, I don't think anybody else is positioned as well as we are.
Yeah. What I want to do is remind people where they can get these stories and articles. So we have a hub on the website, orovalleyaz.gov. If you search 50th anniversary, it's under the community banner at the top as well. There's also a button you can use on the homepage to find this content. Dave, what is the future of the 50th anniversary content? What are you working on? What stories can we expect? What angles?
Right now, working on a story about water and the history of our acquisition of water companies, the formation of the Oro Valley Water Utility, the way that we've diversified our water portfolio. We're talked about roads and infrastructure is coming. We've talked about the history of police, and we have, of course, Chief Kara Riley and retired Chief Danny Sharp and retired Chief Fred Roof. We're going to do something about the Youth Advisory Council and how Oro Valley wisely has brought young people into the community awareness, if you will, participating in where our community is and where it's going to go. I still want to do stuff about the cool places that we've been to, of course, the Honeybee Petroglyphs and Catalina State Park, Tohono Chul, Steam Pump Ranch. I mean, we've got some wonderful assets that are enjoyed by everybody. And then just some of the individuals. I mentioned the Vistoso cyclists, how we're a premier cycling community in the Southwest. I do think about the friends and volunteer organizations that have contributed so much to the fabric here.
Yeah, last time Dave and I got together to sort of map out our plan for the next few months, there weren't enough months in the year, and Dave has just been so charged about this project, and he said, once we run out of months, I'm just going to keep doing this.
Yeah, it's hard to condense 50 years into just one of storytelling.
Right, and there's so many stories, important stories yet to be told.
It's going to be impossible to wrap this podcast up, but I have to try. And the way I want to try to do it is, we hear a lot, history repeats itself, it often rhymes. We look back at history for reasons. It's not just to tell stories. It is to connect as a community, but also to learn from it. And I want to say, what do you think from these stories we can learn as our Oro Valley community? And what do you personally hope for in 50 years to come?
If you look at your podcasts and watch the reels, the videos, and read the stuff that we've created, it gives you a sense of where we came from. And I think when you have a sense of where you came from, you're better prepared to step into the future. Then as you look at the future and you say, okay, here are the assets that this community has. Now, we respect that they have been developed over a whole 50 years of effort. Now, where do we go? Now, how do we make decisions about resources and infrastructure and growth and how we pay for stuff? And I had somebody say to me the other day, they took their kids to Naranja Park, and they love Naranja Park. And one of her kids said, "Who pays for this?"
Love it.
I said,
That's a smart kid.
Yeah.
"That's a smart kid." and a mom who says, "Well, let's do some research. Let's find out how this gets paid for." And as an old Chamber of Commerce guy, I know where the money comes from, and we have to sort of grow together. We have to grow businesses. We have to grow community. We have to grow an understanding and appreciation for how we've become, and I would frankly argue, the finest community in Southern Arizona.
Your turn.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm not going to answer the future casting question because I left my crystal ball in my car. But I appreciate the question about what do we learn or take away from looking at the past. And in my experience, whether it's the town or another country I'm visiting, the more I understand about the past, the more I can appreciate the present and what's happening around me, what I have right now. And when you appreciate what you have right now, it's easier to feel gratitude. It's easier to feel engaged and to want to be part of the conversation because you understand. And so my hope with this project is that folks will be interested in listening to some of those stories. How did this town come to be? Who are those people that were involved in bringing this all together? So they understand and have better appreciation for this gift that we have right now, which is our community.
Very well said.
So folks might be wondering, where can they get their hands on all these articles? We have been publishing them once a month in the Explorer newspaper. So if you've seen them there, good on ya. If you haven't had the chance to pick up the Explorer, they're all on our website. You can go to oralvalleyaz.gov and search for 50th anniversary or click on the 50th anniversary button. And within that web page, you're going to see a button to click on to view the timeline, that interactive timeline Nick was talking about, where you can drill down. And as we've had interviews and content, we've added little clips. And so that continues to grow and evolve. And you can take a look at the repository of features. There's a features button where we've got these articles all listed. So dig around, have fun exploring. We hope you enjoy the content.
Thank you both for coming on the podcast and talking about history and also the future and what it means. It's a heavy conversation. My hope is that listeners go check out this content. There's something for everyone, and it's from a host of different people, historical figures and community members in Oro Valley. So please go check that out. And we will catch you next time on This is Oro Valley.